Ever get that feel? Like when you're really trying to make some serious progress with your English, maybe for smoother conversations or to nail that IELTS exam, but you feel stuck in this vocabulary quicksand, like all these new words just keep slipping
Oh,
away.
yeah, totally. It's such a common thing, isn't it? You put in all that work memorizing words, you think you're getting somewhere, and then it's like your brain just hits delete, gone.
Exactly. It's like you're running but getting nowhere fast. And that's what we're diving deep into today. We've been going through some awesome material on how to, really learn new English vocabulary faster.
So much great stuff out there already.
So much, yeah. And our mission is to really pull out like the strategies that work. We want to help you not just learn those words, but actually remember them, use them, own them. Think of this as your vocabulary boot camp, but, way more fun.
Definitely more fun. And speaking of fun, it's interesting, isn't it, how many people get stuck in that cycle? Learn, forget, repeat. It can be so discouraging.
Right. It's like one step forward, two steps back. But the good news is there are ways to break free. And in this deep dive, we're going to explore some seriously practical techniques to help you do just that. Whether you're, just generally trying to improve your English or you're laser focused on that IELTS exam, these strategies should give you a real edge.
Absolutely. And we're talking about things like why learning words in context is so powerful, that surprisingly effective method of spaced repetition, how grouping words by theme can really unlock things, and, the magic of visualization and mnemonics. Plus, actually using those words, the speaking and writing practice, and making the whole learning process, dare I say, enjoyable. We'll also point out some, common traps to avoid along the way.
Common mistakes, we all make them. But before we get into the how-to, let's zoom out for a sec. Why is vocabulary like the ultimate game changer in English learning?
Well, if you think about it, vocabulary is really the foundation of communication. It's what lets you express yourself, your thoughts, ideas, emotions with clarity, with precision. Without it, you can feel limited. A bit like trying to paint a masterpiece with only a few basic colors.
Yeah, like you're stuck using crayons when you really need oil paints.
It's not just about knowing a ton of words, though, is it? It's about how those words impact your fluency, how smooth and natural your English sounds.
Exactly. A bigger vocabulary directly fuels fluency. You hesitate less, you're not struggling to find the right words, and you just sound more natural. And accuracy, well, that's a big one too. Having those precise words at your fingertips means you're less likely to be misunderstood, and your English just sounds more authentic, more like a native speaker.
And for anyone out there aiming for a good score on the IELTS, vocabulary isn't just like a nice to have. It's essential, right? It's absolutely crucial. Think about it. In the speaking section, the examiners are listening carefully to your range of vocabulary. Can you use a variety of words naturally and appropriately? That's a key factor in getting a higher band score.
It shows you've moved beyond the basics, right? Like you're playing in the major leagues.
Exactly. And it's not about, throwing in big words just to impress. It's about communicating clearly and effectively with a wider range of language. And then there's the writing section. A strong vocabulary gives you the power to be really precise in your descriptions, to develop complex arguments, to present your ideas in a sophisticated way. Otherwise, your writing can lack depth and become repetitive, and that can really hurt your score.
And let's not forget, the benefits go way beyond exams. They spill over into your everyday life, into every interaction you have with English.
Oh, for sure. A bigger vocabulary opens up a whole world of English content. You'll understand books, movies, podcasts, even just everyday conversations so much better. You can truly engage with the language and express yourself more effectively, whether you're chatting with friends or in a professional setting.
It's like leveling up your English experience, making it richer and more rewarding. And as our sources point out, with the right approach, it doesn't have to be this monumental task.
Right. Which brings us to our first core strategy, learning vocabulary in context. What's interesting is how this seemingly simple shift can have such a big impact.
Okay, let's break this down. What exactly do we mean by learning in context, and why is it so much more powerful than, just memorizing lists of words?
Well, think about it this way. Learning in context means you're meeting these new words as they naturally appear, in sentences, conversations, real-life situations, not just isolated words on a page. This way, you learn not just the dictionary definition, but how the word is actually used, its nuances, its grammar, all in a practical way.
Like seeing it in action, right?
Yeah.
Not just the theoretical concept.
Exactly. And that makes it so much easier to remember. It gives your brain all these extra clues for recall. Like the source has this great example with the word examine.
Right, examine. Let's see how that works.
Okay, so if you just memorize examine as to look at something closely, you've got the bare bones, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like having a tool but not knowing how to use it. But if you encounter examine in a sentence, like the doctor will examine the patient's condition, now you're getting somewhere.
It's like, okay, now I see how it fits in the real world.
Right. You see it in a specific scenario connected to an action, a related noun, and suddenly it clicks. And this becomes even more crucial with things like phrasal verbs, idioms, expressions. Those can be tricky, right?
Definitely. Like, what on earth does kick the bucket actually mean?
Exactly. And that's where context is key. The source uses take off as an example. If you only learn that take means to, grab something and off means away, you're missing the big picture. But seeing it in context, like the plane will take off in 5 minutes versus, say, she's taking off her jacket.
Now you're talking. Suddenly it all makes sense.
Right. So how do you actually put this into practice? Immersion is key. Surround yourself with authentic English materials. Books, articles, movies, podcasts, even music. Just soak it all in.
And when you come across a new word, what's the next step?
Don't just gloss over it. Write it down. And here's the key. Write down the whole sentence, the context where you found it. It's like a snapshot of the word in its natural habitat.
Okay, so ditch the isolated word lists. Embrace the power of seeing those words in action. What's our next weapon in the vocabulary arsenal?
Our next strategy is all about making those words stick for good. It's called spaced repetition. What's fascinating is the science behind it, how it really taps into the way our brains work.
Spaced repetition sounds pretty organized, but what is it exactly, and why is it so effective for, long-term memory?
Basically, it's a technique where you review what you've learned, in this case vocabulary, at increasing intervals.
Right.
So instead of cramming everything in one go, you space out your review sessions, and the gaps between them get longer over time.
It's like strategically reminding yourself of the words just before you forget them.
Exactly. And there's a real science to it. You see, when you first learn a new word, it hangs out in your short-term memory. To get it into long-term memory, you need to reinforce those neural connections. And spaced repetition does that by working with what's called the forgetting curve.
The forgetting curve. Sounds ominous.
Well, it's just the natural way our memory fades over time. Spaced repetition is clever because it has you review a word just as you're about to forget it. It's like giving those neural pathways a little jolt, making them stronger.
So it's all about timing those reviews perfectly.
Right. And the act of actually retrieving the word from your memory during a review, especially if it was a bit tricky, makes that memory even stronger.
Okay, so how do we actually do this? How can our listeners start using spaced repetition in their vocabulary routine?
The cool thing is, there are some awesome tools to help. The source mentions apps like Anki and Quizlet. They use these smart algorithms to schedule your reviews based on how well you remember each word.
So if you're struggling with a word, you'll see it more often. And if you ace it, it pops up less frequently. Smart.
Super smart. But if you prefer a more low-tech approach, the source also suggests a simple manual method. Review your new words after 1 day, then again after 3 days, a week later, and then a month later. These expanding intervals really help cement those words in your long-term memory.
Consistency is key, right? Like anything worth doing.
Absolutely. And for anyone prepping for the IELTS, spaced repetition is a game changer. It's not enough to just learn the word once. You got to keep those neural pathways firing to make sure you can recall it confidently on exam day.
So, tech-savvy or old-school spaced repetition sounds like a secret weapon against forgetting. What's next on our vocabulary power-up list?
The next strategy is all about organization, grouping words by theme. The fascinating thing here is how creating these mental categories can make learning and remembering so much easier. It taps into how our brains naturally like to make sense of information.
Makes sense to me. Grouping words by theme. Can you unpack that a bit? Why is it so effective?
Imagine this. When you group words by topic or category, you're creating these connections between them in your mind. You start to see how they relate to each other, how they fit into a broader context. It's like building a mental map instead of just memorizing random locations.
And our source specifically calls out IELTS Prep as a great example. How does this help IELTS learners in particular?
Well, so many of the IELTS speaking and writing prompts revolve around these common themes like
Mhm.
education, the environment, technology, health, things like that. If you've already grouped your vocabulary around these themes, you have this ready-made toolbox of relevant words and phrases at your fingertips.
So when a question pops up on, say, the impact of social media, boom, you've got a whole arsenal of words ready to go.
Exactly. It makes you so much more efficient and gives you that extra confidence. To make it more concrete, let's imagine the theme of food, like the source suggests. Instead of just memorizing random food words, you break it down. Fruits, vegetables, desserts, cooking methods, flavors, you name it. And then within, say, fruits, you list specific examples: apple, banana, grape, mango.
It's like building this intricate web of related words.
Precisely. And this helps you not only learn them initially, but also recall them later when you're talking about anything related to food. Plus, this grouping can really help you grasp those subtle differences between similar words, like the nuances.
Right, like sour versus tart or sweet versus savory. It all starts to make more sense.
Absolutely. And in the IELTS speaking test, being able to discuss these topics with more precision and variety is going to impress those examiners.
So it's not just about memorizing, it's about understanding those finer shades of meaning. How can our listeners actually start implementing thematic grouping? Any practical tips?
There are a few ways to go about it. You can create your own thematic vocabulary lists in a notebook or, a digital document. Lots of flashcard apps also let you categorize your vocabulary by theme, which is super handy.
So organize your vocabulary, see the connections, learn faster, remember more. Got it. What's next on our vocabulary boosting adventure?
The next tip is all about unleashing the power of your imagination. We're talking about visualization and mnemonics. The fascinating thing here is how using your imagination can make even the most abstract words memorable.
Visualization and mnemonics sounds a bit like, mental magic tricks. But how do they work?
Visualization is all about creating a vivid mental image, a picture in your mind that represents the word or concept. You're basically engaging your visual memory to create this concrete, memorable link to the word's meaning.
The source uses the word meticulous as an example. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So meticulous means showing great attention to detail, right? To remember it, you might imagine someone super carefully organizing their desk, making sure every little thing is in its exact place.
I can picture it perfectly. Everything perfectly aligned.
Exactly. That strong visual association just helps you connect the word with its meaning. And then there are mnemonics. These are memory aids that use all sorts of associations, images, sounds, rhymes, even silly little stories to help you remember.
Make a memory hook. Clever. The source gives an example for the word assiduous. How does a mnemonic help with that one?
Okay, so assiduous means showing great care and attention. To remember it, you could use the phrase, "A student who is assiduous studies with great assiduity." The similar sound in assiduous and ass creates a link. A bit humorous, maybe, but definitely memorable.
That's a good one. Definitely memorable. And the source also mentions the story method. What's that all about?
The story method is where you create a short, engaging narrative that incorporates the word you're learning. For example, to remember elaborate, you might come up with a sentence like, "She gave an elaborate explanation of her travel plans, describing every tiny detail." By putting the word in a mini story, you're giving it context, making it easier to recall.
It's like weaving the word into a memorable tapestry.
Exactly. And the key here is to make it personal, make it weird, make it funny. The more unique and engaging your mental images or stories are, the better they stick.
So unleash your inner storyteller. What's the next step in our quest for vocabulary mastery?
The next tip is all about moving beyond just passively absorbing words. It's about actively using them. That's how you really solidify your understanding and make those words truly yours.
Right. Knowing a word and actually being able to use it are two different things. Why is that active use so important?
Think of it this way. Just knowing the definition is like recognizing a word when you see it, but not actually knowing how to use it in a sentence. To truly master it, to use it spontaneously, you need to activate it.
You need to take it for a spin, so to speak.
Exactly. By speaking and writing with those new words, you're internalizing them. You're understanding their nuances, how they fit into different contexts. You're making them part of your active vocabulary, the words you naturally use when you communicate.
So how do we start doing that? How can we make those words an active part of our language?
Well, the source recommends consciously using new words in your everyday conversations. So if you just learned meticulous or elaborate, try slipping them into your chats with friends, family, anyone who will listen. Even if it feels a bit forced at first, the effort of using them will really help cement them in your memory.
It's like giving them a test drive in the real world. And what about writing? How does that help solidify vocabulary?
Writing gives you this safe space to play with those new words, to experiment without the pressure of a live conversation. The source suggests trying things like short essays, journal entries, even social media posts.
Get creative with it. And for those preparing for the IELTS, writing is a must-do anyway.
Exactly. And the key here is to focus on using those new words accurately and naturally. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. The more you write, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
It's all about building that vocabulary muscle. And our next tip focuses on a crucial element, making this a whole process more enjoyable and consistent.
Absolutely. Our sixth tip is all about making vocabulary learning fun, not a chore. Because honestly, when you enjoy the process, you learn faster and you retain more. It's like the more positive your emotional connection to learning is, the better it works.
It's like anything else in life, right?
Right.
When you enjoy it, you stick with it. So how do we inject some fun into vocabulary learning?
Well, the source suggests finding ways to integrate it into things you already enjoy. Like if you're a movie buff, watch English language films with subtitles and really pay attention to the vocabulary. If you're a foodie, watch cooking shows in English. The key is to choose things that align with your interests so the vocabulary feels relevant and engaging.
And what about gamifying the learning process? That sounds like a fun way to spice things up.
Definitely. There are tons of language learning apps like Quizlet that have quizzes, games, challenges, all sorts of things to make it feel more like, a brain workout than studying. And good old-fashioned word games like crosswords and word searches can be super fun too.
A little friendly competition never hurt anyone either.
Exactly. And just as important as fun is consistency. The source recommends carving out even just 10 or 15 minutes each day for focused vocabulary practice. That regularity helps to solidify those new words.
Make it a habit, like brushing your teeth, but for your brain. And remember to celebrate your progress.
Yes. Give yourself a pat on the back when you hit those milestones, like learning a certain number of words or sticking to your routine. Positive reinforcement works wonders.
So find ways to make it fun, make it a habit, and give yourself those little victories along the way. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some common pitfalls, some mistakes that we all make when trying to build our vocabulary. Being aware of these can save you a lot of time and frustration.
Totally. What's interesting is how many people fall into these traps without even realizing it. So let's bring them out into the open.
Let's expose them. Okay, first up, learning words in isolation. We've already talked about the power of context, but why is memorizing those isolated word lists so ineffective?
Well, it comes back to that idea of learning in a vacuum. When you just memorize words without seeing them in action, you're not really learning how to use them. It's like having ingredients but not knowing how to make a recipe.
You've got the pieces, but not the whole picture. Okay, mistake number 2, not reviewing regularly. We know spaced repetition is good, but what happens when we neglect those reviews?
Well, basically those new words just fade away. You're not giving them a chance to move into your long-term memory. It's like writing something down on a whiteboard and then never looking at it again. Spaced repetition is like taking that whiteboard and putting it somewhere you'll see it every day.
So make those reviews a non-negotiable part of your routine. Got it. Mistake number 3, focusing only on passive vocabulary. Can you explain what that means and why it's a problem?
Sure. Passive vocabulary is all the words you understand when you read or hear them, but you don't actively use yourself. It's like, recognizing someone's face but not knowing their name. You need to actively use those words to make them part of your everyday language.
Otherwise, they're just sitting there in your brain gathering dust.
Mm.
Okay, last mistake. Trying to learn way too many words at once. It's tempting to cram, especially with an exam looming, but why is that a bad idea?
Well, it overwhelms your brain. Imagine trying to juggle 20 balls at once. Chances are you're going to drop them all. It's far better to focus on a smaller set of words, really master them, and then add more gradually. Quality over quantity, always.
So to recap those vocabulary learning no-nos, ditch the isolated word lists, make those reviews a priority, put those words into action, don't try to cram everything at once. Avoiding these pitfalls will make the whole process much more effective and enjoyable.
Exactly. By being mindful of those common mistakes, you can really optimize your learning and make serious progress.
Okay, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. Let's bring it all together and highlight those key strategies one more time.
So we started with the foundation, learning vocabulary in context. That's where you see those words in their natural environment, understand their nuances, how they're actually used. Then we talked about spaced repetition, the magic of reviewing words at increasing intervals to cement them in your long-term memory.
And don't forget about grouping words by theme. Creating those mental maps makes learning and remembering so much easier. Plus, visualization and mnemonics. Those are our secret weapons for tackling tricky words and making vocabulary stick.
Absolutely. And remember, you got to put those words into practice. Don't just learn them, use them. Speak with them, write with them, make them a part of your everyday life.
And find ways to make the whole process fun. Integrate vocabulary learning into things you enjoy. Make it a habit, celebrate your progress. It's a journey, not a race, and every new word you learn is a step in the right direction.
A journey that's totally worth taking. And here's a thought for our listeners. Choose just one of these techniques we've talked about today. Just one. Try it out this week. See how it works for you.
We hope this deep dive has given you a toolkit full of practical strategies to boost your vocabulary and really take your English to the next level. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep having fun with it.